Thank you for joining us. In this life-changing global emergency, like many others, I'm still working from home. But I'm pleased to say a lot is happening worldwide to address the present challenges actually facing everyone in the world. And we're doing this with new discoveries and treatments and the means and technology to reduce the COVID-19 risks and, of course, treat the disease itself. So I'm more optimistic than ever that we'll overcome this unprecedented time in history of pandemic and economic crisis. We intend to continuously keep you informed with impartial, scientifically validated updates and solutions from every possible source with new reports and developments. And now a breakthrough. Enlivex Therapeutics reported positive top-line results of a clinical trial of Allocetra in severe COVID-19 patients in which all 5 patients had a complete recovery. We'll hear from Dr. Oren Hershkovitz right after these messages.
In handling threats, our immune system relies on several key players. First, macrophages and dendritic cells detect and devour pathogens. Second, the macrophages release cytokines, which are signals that alert the rest of the immune system into action. This activates the third player, T cells, killer cells, and others who respond to the alert signals by attacking the threat. In killing the threat, T cells and killer cells themselves become early apoptotic, that is, dying cells, and are devoured by the macrophages. This allows for a relaxation mechanism. Once the macrophages devour enough early apoptotic cells, they signal an all clear and the system rebalances to its normal state. However, there is a dangerous, life-threatening condition called Cytokine Release Syndrome, or a cytokine storm. In this hyperimmune response, cytokine signaling spirals out of control, causing the immune system to violently attack healthy organs. Cytokine storms are extremely dangerous and can lead to organ damage, multiple organ failure, and death. In fact, they are the 3rd leading cause of mortality in the United States after cardiovascular diseases and cancer. Since a cytokine storm involves multiple biological emergencies all at once, it does not respond to traditional solutions that use a single molecule to target a single emergency. This severe condition requires a major shift in therapeutic approach. To truly avert cytokine storms and restore immune balance, Enlivex has developed Allocetra. This novel therapy uses the body's own natural regulation mechanisms without suppressing the immune system. With Allocetra, billions of densely concentrated early apoptotic cells are infused into the patient's bloodstream. This causes the macrophages and dendritic cells to feed on the Allocetra cells, thus releasing fewer and fewer cytokine alert signals until the immune system is rebalanced to its normal state. Crisis averted. Allocetra, averting cytokine storms and restoring immune balance to save lives.
Life Extension magazine brings you new discoveries in health and anti-aging. Our science-based research and supplements are so advanced they're many years ahead of the medical mainstream, with quality control standards that exceed FDA mandates. Life Extension has covered groundbreaking medical research for more than 35 years. For your health and future, you deserve the best. Learn more at lifeextension.com.
Joining us now from Israel is Dr. Oren Hershkovitz, the CEO of Enlivex Therapeutics. Oren, it's such a pleasure and honor to have you with us today from across the world.
Same here. Pleasure to be on this on the show.
It's so strange for us to conduct interviews like this. Here I am still working from my home here in South Florida, and you are in Israel. And these are such very, very strange, odd times in history with the crisis of the pandemic and the economic crisis, and it's only smart people like you, I hope, who will pull us out of it. Anyway, please tell us a little bit about your company.
So Enlivex Therapeutics is it's a clinical stage company. We are focused on developing therapeutic drugs for life-threatening unmet medical conditions. We are based in Israel. The technology was developed and invented and developed in Israel, so we're very proud of it. The company is a public company traded in the Nasdaq and dually traded also in TASE, in the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. We are now about 40 people and focusing really on trying to develop this new innovative drugs to treat those disease or conditions where people are dying, and currently there's no good solutions for them.
Well, you have a solution. I understand that has worked remarkably well. Just a few days ago, you released patients with 100% success using your medication, your Allocetra. Tell us about it, please.
The main drug that we develop is actually, as you said, it's called Allocetra, and maybe I'll start a little bit about what exactly the drug does, and then we'll take it from there on how do we evaluate the effectiveness and safety of this drug. So the idea behind our technology is that in sepsis, in COVID-19 and other diseases, there is a situation where the immune system, naturally responding to the intruder, to the pathogen, certain circumstances go out of control.
The infamous, sorry for interrupting you, what you're referring to is the infamous cytokine storm, I believe, yes?
Yes. The outcome of this is reflected in a cytokine storm, what's now very commonly being used. The term is now very, people know what cytokine storm means, which is something that, is attributed to the COVID-19 disease. But yes, it's exactly that. The outcome of this is it's an hyperimmune situation. The immune system responds in such a magnitude that eventually it goes out of control, and that is reflected in high levels of various cytokines, which lead eventually to the fact that the immune system itself is damaging the organs of the patient and leading to organ failure and eventually death. Now what we do is we try to reduce this storm, reduce this hyperimmune response, and actually re-educate the immune system to go back into its normal status, its homeostasis, what we call it in biology. And the fact is that, and let's take COVID for instance, and we'll talk about what we did so far and where we're heading, but let's say COVID for instance, there are several stages in the disease. Right, so the first stage is where the immune system is trying to deal with the virus, and in many cases it's successfully doing it, and it goes undetected, right? It could be asymptomatic or with light symptoms. When it goes to the second stage of the disease, where you start seeing respiratory issues and failures and so on, that's at that stage actually comes into play the immune response, this excessive immune response, which eventually deteriorates the situation of that patient. And the virus is no longer the problem. So what you need to do is actually to treat the immune system, to modulate or re-educate the immune system to go back to normal. And that's where we step in. So we're not trying to eliminate the virus. There are many drugs either out there trying to do that, such as remdesivir and others, but what we're trying to do is to reduce the cytokine storm. The immune system works in such a way that it knows to stimulate itself once there is an intruder or the virus goes in, right? There's a response, and a certain stage, once the immune system is taking over the situation and eliminate the virus, it should go back to normal. So there's a feedback inhibition that tell the immune cells, well, we're okay. Let's relax. I'm trying to simplify this, right? So there are cells within the immune system that knows exactly how to do that. They are the key regulators of the immune response, and they know how to stimulate the immune system, and they know how to relax the immune system. Those cells are called macrophages, right? So we can call them the key regulator of the immune system for simplicity. In those situations in COVID and other sepsis, other conditions where there's a hyperimmune response and cytokine storms, those macrophages, those key regulators, are not doing exactly what they're supposed to, which is relaxing and taking the shifting the response back to homeostasis, to normal situation. And what we do is we give them specific cells that we call them apoptotic cells that are in program death condition. And once we give those cells to those patients, they are being eaten, engulfed by those macrophages. And this is a signal. It's a biological process that we actually utilize. It's a signal for those cells to relax. And relax means that they bring back lower down the immune response. So we take take the advantage of what we call a biological process. And we utilize it in order to relax the response of the immune system of those patients. And that's the problem. It's no longer the virus.
Dr. Oren, tell us please where this technology was actually initially invented.
So the technology was developed and invented by Professor Oren Hershkovitz from Hadassah Ein Kerem. And he actually investigated the role of apoptotic cells in the response of the immune system. He came up with the finding that those cells are being eaten, by other cells in the immune system, and that plays a role in the immune response. And based on that, he developed the technology. And later on, it became a biotech company, and now it's being chaired by Shai Novik, and Professor Mevorach is our chief medical officer, and we have a great team here is doing remarkable work in developing this drug. So, it's a team effort, and I'm very happy to lead this wonderful team.
Fascinating. Let's talk about recent history. A few days ago, President Trump here in the United States actually was in Walter Reed Hospital being treated for COVID. Please share with us what you know about his course of treatment.
Well, I know he received the cocktail from Regenera, which is a cocktail of neutralizing antibodies that aiming for neutralizing the virus itself. And additional drugs, he probably received the best treatment you can think of. And eventually he went out of danger, I would say, and got released from the hospital. This is where exactly, I would say, the stage where we step in with Allocetra, with our innovative idea of relaxing the immune system. In this case, they were probably able to eliminate the virus and the response at that stage early enough in order to prevent deterioration of President Trump. If that was not proven to be successful, Allocetra could have been the alternative treatment at that stage for President Trump. This is now theoretical, but that's exactly where we treat. That's exactly the type of patients we're treating. The elimination of the virus is no longer plays a role in treating those patients, and then potentially, Allocetra could be the solution.
So to simplify it, actually, the first thing that occurs is one gets the virus and one begins to have symptoms, and these symptoms can, at the present time, be suppressed to some degree initially, the virus itself, but then what happens, I understand, is there is the inflammation that comes next where the body is attacking itself. And again, how did the people at Walter Reed address that second stage so far, if they did?
Well, they're trying to treat it with different anti-inflammatory drugs. Some of them are actually, like dexamethasone seems to be working. There were studies showing that there is reduced mortality potentially. But it seems like the response is so strong that you probably need more than that. Now, there are different strategies to try to treat this hyperinflammation that we're talking about. And there were studies trying to eliminate certain proteins that play a role in the hyperimmune response. So there are what we call cytokines. Cytokines are proteins that are secreted from different cells in the immune system, such as the one we talked about before, like macrophages. And they could be promoting inflammation, and they could be anti-inflammatory cytokines, right? So, for instance, one of them, IL-6, was one that was shown in different studies that they are associated with high levels in COVID-19 patients. Problem is that this response, the immune response, is very complex, and usually just targeting a single protein, a single cytokine, a single pathway of the immune response is probably not enough, and unfortunately 2 different phase 3 studies failed to show an improvement in COVID-19 patient.
So does Allocetra, sorry for interrupting you, sir, does Allocetra address more than one pathway?
Yeah, so that's exactly the idea. We're not targeting a single pathway. We're targeting the cells that are the key regulator of the whole response, right? So it's not this or that cytokines or this or that protein or whatever. It's actually going to the control room and telling the control room, guys, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. And that's why this is a holistic response to a very heterogeneous situation. Same with COVID-19, same with sepsis, which is a huge unmet medical need, and probably would have spoken about it much more if not the COVID pandemic. But there are 270,000 people dying from sepsis, around about 270,000 people dying from sepsis in the United States. It's the 3rd leading cause of death in hospitals in the United States. And there are common share physiologies between COVID and sepsis. So we're also developing this drug for sepsis, and actually have good results with that. We didn't talk about the results of the company yet, but we'll talk about it in a second. But that's the same problem. There were many studies, numerous number of studies trying to tackle a specific cytokine, a specific pathway like TNF-alpha or so. They're all failed. And the reason is that the response is such heterogeneous, and different patients have different response, and the complexity of the immune system is such that probably you need something which is more holistic, and the scope of the treatment is such that it doesn't treat a specific pathway, but goes down to those cells that regulate the response. And I think we are, to my knowledge, probably the only company in the world that knows really how to immunomodulate those macrophages to relax the immune response, and by that to prevent further deterioration and treatment of those patients.
To simplify things for our viewers, again, COVID-19 attacks one with the virus, and then there is the secondary fire, which is the cytokine storm, which your company, your product, Allocetra, can actually address. And you've had a remarkable success rate with the few 100% of the few test cases were all 100% success, I understand.
Yeah, so we've treated 5 patients classified by the NIH as severe or critical COVID-19 patients. And all of the 5 patients fully recovered and were released from the hospital within a couple of days. And now, being completely encouraged from the results, we're now planning to extend the study in order to evaluate really the safety and efficacy of this drug. You need to have a larger group of patients to evaluate those exactly endpoints, and we're now working on that. We had very good results from 10 patients in sepsis, but this is a new disease, as we all know. It's very complex. So it's just the initial, I would say, or proof of concept, but very encouraging proof of concept at this stage.
And I read about it on October the 1st, actually, of this year, this strange year 2020. So I'm looking forward to your doing many more treatments to many more patients because it's needed. A quick question for you here. How expensive is it? How complicated is it to manufacture Allocetra?
So there is a level of complexity on the one hand. On the other hand, if you're familiar with CAR T and other cell therapies, which are very complex, this is an off-the-shelf cell therapy. So we don't tailor it to a specific patient or taking the cells from a specific donor, which is a huge advantage. Not overly complicated, but this is biology, and drug development is always a complex story, but we know how to do it. We did it before. It's fairly simple relatively to biological drug manufacturing.
Are there any other possible uses for Allocetra considering Graves' disease and other autoimmune diseases?
Well, definitely. That's the idea about, that's what I said. If we'll take, for instance, sepsis, definitely it's something that we are heading towards a huge study which will commence by the end of this year in around 160 patients in several sites in Israel. Again, in sepsis, we treated 10 patients, moderate to severe sepsis patients. All of them completely recovered from their sepsis status within relatively fast, something similar to what we saw in COVID. We're ready to start very soon a phase 2 dose-finding phase 2 study in 160 patients. Potentially, this mechanism of action of the drug could address various conditions, and there are many, to be honest, where there is an unbalanced immune response. We're currently focusing on sepsis and COVID-19, but we are planning to extend it to additional indications where we can address the unmet medical need based on the mechanism of action of the drug.
Well, there are many other conditions that need to be addressed, and once the emergencies, the priorities are out of the way, it will be phenomenal to hear about this. And it is said of you and your company that this is really an outstanding breakthrough in a year in which we need some optimistic hope for things to occur. And just out of curiosity, since we right now are still wondering what's going to happen with President Trump, if he does have a relapse into certain situations, is the Israel government and are you considering the possibility of stepping in to help him with the secondary inflammatory situations?
I'm wishing President Trump all the best, and hopefully we don't have to deal with that situation. But basically, if there will be a need, definitely we are willing to send Allocetra and see if it works and hopefully help him. But in general, I would say that we're working very closely with the Israeli government and the health authorities in Israel to try to promote and accelerate the development of Allocetra to make it accessible to as many people as possible. It's not that easy, but we're working closely together to try to make it work.
And teamwork is what really should exist. There should be no competitive jealousies, there should be no partisan politics going on, and whatever can be done coming out of whichever country, whether it's Israel or other, that can address these horrific realities that we are facing today, there should be complete cooperation. And you are in the forefront of such research and worthy of great admiration.
Thank you. Yeah, I totally agree with you. This awful situation that we're dealing with requires everybody to step in and help each other to find the solution as fast as possible. I think we're seeing it basically in the drug development and the healthcare systems in a way that companies are sharing information. There are huge grants trying to promote solutions and so on, and that's the way to go. That's the only way we'll eventually defeat this disease.
Hopefully, and let's hope that with the same positive attitude, humanity can address so many of the other issues that are troubling our beautiful planet. Dr. Oren, it's a real pleasure to have you on the show, and Mazel tov, and thank you so very much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, and appreciate the time, and hopefully we'll be able to speak again soon about our next upcoming results and the progress of this drug. Thank you.
We'll be delighted to do so. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We are at FAU, and with us now is Bill Faloon. Bill, this is the strangest environment we've done an interview in all the, good Lord, 20 years I've known you.
Yeah, we got 4,800 empty seats. But thank goodness for cameras.
Absolutely. So, as we stand here at this strange time in history, give us an update on COVID.
Well, the encouraging news, and this is all considered preliminary, but it's so consistent, I'm just going to tell the world, and that is every observational study that they've done to evaluate levels of 25-hydroxy vitamin D in people's blood indicates that people who maintain sufficient or optimal ranges of 25-hydroxy vitamin D, their risk of contracting COVID is reduced and their risk of progressing to severe COVID illness and mortality dramatically reduced. And all it takes to maintain optimal levels are inexpensive vitamin D supplements. They're sold everywhere. It doesn't matter which one you buy, but you take about 5,000 IUs a day with a meal, and you're going to boost your 25-hydroxy vitamin D blood levels up to a range that people are seeing results. And we're waiting for the results of randomized controlled studies, so we'll know for sure if taking a vitamin D supplement works. But at this point, there's probably 50 or more studies in which doctors are observing the patients who come into the ER room with higher 25-hydroxy vitamin D levels, well, they're not progressing to the ICU. They're not dying at the rate that people who show up with very low levels. And other data is showing that people with higher levels of vitamin D, their risk of contracting COVID is dramatically reduced. So that's something that everyone can afford, and I wish the whole country would recognize that vitamin D is good for everything as far as reducing disease risk, but it also may help boost immune function and reduce the inflammation associated with COVID-19.
What else can people do, Bill?
Well, people are supplementing with vitamin C and zinc and anything they can do to boost their immune function, get a good night's sleep. All the different aspects of healthy immunity are what's going to save more people from contracting COVID or developing serious illness. In the meantime, maintain healthy immune function to repress the viral activity in your body that is slowly creating a lot of problems.
Bill, thank you so very much. And this concludes our brief update from FAU here. I'm Richard Peretz. Thank you for being with us.